It's Thursday today and it's a public holiday, and I've also taken tomorrow off as well to have a really long weekend. If you think we have a lot of holidays in New Zealand, we do at the start of the year. There's a whole cluster of them, from Christmas, New Year, anniversary days, Waitangi Day, and then a little bit later on sort of Easter and Anzac Day, and then there's big gaps all through winter where there are no breaks. But I'm making the most of it, and I am machining up a special tool to do up these little, I don't know what you call them, nuts, threaded collars, but I drew this up and somewhere, I'm not sure where I've put it. I drew it all up in CAD to get the right dimensions, and I 3D printed a little model of what that's supposed to look like, which has now vanished. That's interesting. Don't know where I've put that. But basically that little model was my little test. Must be around somewhere. So that I could see that, there it is, this. So this was my little test piece, and that, I like doing that because it helps me see that my little CAD model is accurate. It's going to produce an accurate thing. And then from the CAD model you can get all the measurements you need. So I worked it out, so I knew what measurements I needed to do on the mill to cut these different pieces. What I'll do is I'll turn it around, and if it'll fit, I can put that in my 6-sided sort of collet block and then mill the hex on the end, and that'll be a Whitworth hex. So that one, you can use that as a socket or a spanner. So I've also set up my cooling system, my coolant, and this is the first time I've used this properly. I did get aluminium washers, and this morning I put those on the underside of these bolts where it was leaking through, which is a real pain in the neck because you have to access everything through that little door. But I put plenty of Permatex thread sealer on the ends of the bolts, and then used those aluminium washers and did them up tight, and that seems to have sealed it. I've used another couple here, one on the top, one on the bottom, and that's sealed that up nicely, and the coolant's working brilliantly. It's made a massive difference to how well the machine works. Normally it would be rattly and I could only take tiny cuts. With this, if the cut is too small, I can't even hear that it's cutting. Normally I would know it was cutting. Even if you were doing like a 1 thou pass, you would hear it. But with this, it just makes it so smooth. It's making a massive difference. Surface finish is way better. The chips aren't flying everywhere, which is one of the main reasons I wanted to do it. I'm sick of getting little metal splinters. But this little thing should, theoretically, oh, it's very nice. So that fits on there. This is high tensile steel, so 4140. So hopefully those little tabs are going to be strong enough, but that's a good fit on there. You can tell it's cutting so much better because I haven't deburred any of that, and it still sort of fits quite nicely. So I'm really pleased with that. I'm really pleased it's not leaking, and it seems to be draining nicely. Yeah, well worth doing that modification. It's one of those things where I'm sort of kicking myself now, saying, oh, why did I wait so long? So I can take this out now because I know this fits, and see if I can mill the hex. I want to do it in the collet block because then I can easily, you can easily set it up. If you try to do it like this, vertically, you have to go backwards and forwards and move it. But with that block, you just rotate it, and the only setting is the depth, really. I did make one small mistake. I had to turn this down from a chunk of of bigger bar, which takes a long time on a little lathe. It's very annoying. I keep the bucket there for the swarf because one of the things with a small lathe, especially like this, a little benchtop one, is there's not a lot of room for the swarf to go. I've only got this little tray, so you have to keep stopping and cleaning that, otherwise you end up getting the spinning ball of death swarf on the chuck. So I often stop, but because I was doing that, I wasn't paying attention to my measurements and I overshot one of the dimensions. So you might notice there, this is meant to be 1 inch diameter all the way around. This bit is slightly undersized, but luckily I was able to turn it around in the vise, in the chuck, and machine this down to the right dimension. So I need to adjust my CAD drawing so I know how much to take off this to get that hex, although to be honest they don't have to be that accurate. Yeah, that's where we're at the moment. This is how my little tool ended up. I couldn't mill the flats on the end because my 6-way collet will only go up to 20 millimeters, and this is 1 inch, 25.4. So instead I drilled and tapped it for a metric bolt, a 12 mil metric bolt. I could have used a 1/2 inch BSF, but they're really expensive and I didn't want to waste one on this, so 12 mil it is, which means it'll take a 19 millimeter or a 3/4 AF socket will fit on that. And that I also just cleaned it and put some bluing on it just to give it a bit of rust protection, and then that should fit neatly in there. So that lets me do up those nuts. There's more than one of these used on the bike. I can't remember the other places, somewhere in the gearbox or the clutch or something like that, but I may need this in another couple of places. But I think that might be a different size one, which means I might have to make another one. Nope, that's the same size, so that's good. Although I don't actually need to take that off on this bike, I'm going to leave that alone, just give it a good clean up. So that means I can replace this. It is definitely wear on the gear, so, and I suspect that's because this wasn't done up very tight to start with. So what I'm going to do is use some of the 660 Loctite on the splines, that's what it's for, and then a new lock tab thing on here because I've got some of those, and I'll put this back on and I'll do it up nice and tight. I think that Loctite will be fine. I think with this tightened up really tight, it's not going to move too much and the Loctite will take up the gap. It does say it's not, you know, it could fail with high power applications. This is not a high power application, so I'm pretty sure that'll work perfectly fine for what I'm going to do, and it's obviously been that way for a while anyway. So that's done. I'll finish cleaning this up and put that back together. I've dug out my red coat. This is the stuff I'm going to use to line the fuel tank. It's really good stuff. So I bought one container of this quite a while ago, and I've used this to do, I think I did the tank in the Austin 7, I've done the tank in the Riley, I've done the tank on the Kawasaki, and I did a little petrol can, one of these I've lined as well. That was actually my test one. I think it's this one. Just to see how it would work and if it holds up and if there are any problems over time, and that's been in there for probably a couple of years now, I think, and it's perfectly fine. And I've still got half a container of this left. That's how long this stuff lasts. It comes as a powder. You mix it up with acetone and the acetone dissolves it. It takes a day or so to fully dissolve. And the good thing about this stuff is if you ever need to get it out, you can wash it out with acetone again. It'll redissolve it. But petrol and ethanol based fuel won't attack it. I prefer using this stuff to something like that POR 15. I've tried that in the past, way back when I did the MG actually, and never had much luck with it. It's tough stuff, and when it works really well, but when it doesn't, it'll peel off in sheets, and you really don't want anything peeling off inside your petrol tank. But as far as I can see, this stuff works really well. So there's more than enough there to do that little tank, which hopefully I'll get to today. And I need to flush out the radiator, and I have got more from Super Cheap, more it's basically CLR type stuff. So this is another concentrated one. This will make, again, it's 2-to-1 ratio for this stuff. So I'll put that in, soak it through that. This is very, very weak, so it's been sitting there a couple of days, but it should be fine. But I think it's probably time to take it out. And yeah, I bought decent rubber gloves. These little ones are no good. So I got some of the proper heavy duty ones. I like these orange ones. These again were from Super Cheap. They hold up so much better, but I still use the other ones for doing things like the saddlebags, which I also need to do today. But now a bit of a cleanup again. So this will be interesting. I think I need to figure out now that all the swarf is covered in liquid, I think what I'll do is I'll let it dry and then see if I can just vacuum it up. But no, there's been no leaks as far as I can tell. It was leaking down here. No, it's perfectly dry. Oh, it's a bit hard to see, but no, there was liquid in there before, so yeah, really pleased with how well that mod's worked and how much nicer it makes using the mill. Yeah, I'll wait for it to dry off and then give it a good clean. This stuff is anti-corrosive, so after my last test, it did seem to make a difference. It didn't surface rust, which was really good. So yeah, bit of a cleanup again. This is what the red coat looks like. That's come off the inside of the lid of the container it's kept in, and you can see it forms a film, and it's very strong. I was trying to rip it and I couldn't rip it, but a little bit of acetone should, in theory, start dissolving it. I'll leave that sitting just for a few minutes, see if it does. So I've gone ahead and I've cleaned the tank. I soaked the tank in the evaporust till all the rust came out of the inside of it. I've given it a really good clean. I then gave it a good wash with water. I left it in the sun to dry for a bit, and then I air dried it with the air compressor hose, and then the last step is to flush it out with acetone and then dry it again, and that makes sure it's completely clean inside there for this red coat to bond to the steel, I guess, to coat the steel. But I filled it up and I just use a piece of tape over the outlet. I've screwed a little brass bung into the fuel tap. That lets me drain it off through there, and it also keeps the threads clean. I don't want the red coat in the threads. So it's been coated once, and that's now draining out. You can see it dripping. It takes ages to drain, but you don't want any pools of it left in there. So I've actually got it propped up on the engine to let it drain out. I'll probably put the second coat in a minute, and the only reason I do that is to make sure I haven't missed any spots. And I am going to give the outside of the tank just a coat of gloss black, because most of it's there, but it is starting to come off, and where it's coming off it's going to rust. The tank you can't see at all, it's completely up inside the body of the bike, so I'm just going to go ahead and protect that. This looked sort of bent to me, and I thought, oh, I'm going to need to straighten that. But then I had a look. If you look at the bottom of the tank, you can see that red coat still dripping out. You can see the bracket that holds the tank in place hasn't been welded on straight. So I think what they've done is, how do I have that? Like that. I think what they had to do is, because that wasn't straight, they've had to bend this to get the holes to line up. So I haven't bent anything myself. I'm going to leave it. We can tweak that when it goes back on the bike. But I think a lot of this is drained out now. It honestly dribbles for quite a long time as it comes off the sides and leaves a nice thin film, which is what you want. And this is why it has to be perfectly clean. If there was any oil or grease or anything like that in there, it won't stick to the metal. You'll get clear spots. So I think I'll put another coat through and then leave it at that. They do say on the thing that for smaller tanks you can get away with one coat, but bigger tanks, 50 litres or more, you should do two. I find it doesn't hurt doing two, just to be absolutely certain it's got coverage. This I've been through and cleaned up a bit more. I'm trying to keep the electronics or the electrics clear. Hopefully nothing too much has gone in there, but I'll give all of that a clean as well. You can see where this has had a meltdown in the past. I'm not sure what's happened there, but I've cleaned up the pistons, and this engine has been gone through before because these are 20 thou over pistons. The rings, somebody mentioned the rings might be worn, and they left me some tips on what to look for. The top ring still seems chrome, but I'm really not sure what I'm looking for, so I don't think they're too bad. It's difficult to tell. I'll see if I have to order parts from the UK, which I will. I'll just get a new set of rings probably, because they're not expensive, and while it's a part like this, it makes sense doing it. And I did I've reattached that gear, got everything really clean. I cleaned all of that with acetone. I did use some of the Loctite on the splines because they were worn, and I did that up nice and tight using my little tool, which works really well. I'm pleased with how this came out. What I was able to do is jam a wooden hammer handle up into there to block the crank against the side of the crankcase so it wouldn't turn, and then this fits on there, and I was able to crank that down really tight, just with a normal sized socket set thing. You don't want to go mad. I didn't stick a 6-foot bar on it or anything, but that did tighten it up, and there's no play in that now at all. The hardest part was the little tabs, the little lock tabs. I think they're unevenly spaced around there, so it's easy to always get one of them to line up to one of these 4 slots. But that was tricky, just getting it to line up. And then the hardest part was actually lifting the tab, because this is down so hard, and you've only got a couple of millimeters of the tab sticking out, and it's flat on top of the gear. I had to grind an old chisel to put quite a sharp edge on it to get underneath it to try and lift it up. And then I was able to use a punch to punch it into the slot. I don't think you can quite see, but it's this one here. So that's all locked back in place. I was able to pull out the valve guides. They hadn't fallen out because there's a buildup of kind of carbon on the end, or oil. So I just gently clean that with like a Scotch-Brite, and those are a lot freer now. I was able to peek in there and have a look at the cam. That all looks good, so I'm not going to touch that. Don't want to lose that. And the other thing I have done is started degreasing this. I'm going to replace these clutch plates because they're really in a bad condition, and I've got new ones. So I wasn't worried about getting them wet or degreased. So I'll take that apart, I'll give that another clean. There's still some grease in there. Yep, everything is filthy. So once the clutch is off, that'll be easier to clean. Cleaned up the sump as well, and again all the paint had come off that and it was rusty, so I've given it a coat of engine enamel. It's just to stop it rusting. The gasket that was on there, it may have been the original gasket, and it was really glued on there. I had to scrape it off using the chisel I did the Loctite with. Scrape it off the metal and then wire brush it to get rid of every trace of that. So whatever they used to glue that in place, probably shellac or something, worked really well. But I didn't want to reuse that gasket because there was the bit on the inside where the gasket hadn't been clamped, where it hadn't been compressed, and that was all hard and brittle, and I didn't want bits of it breaking off and going through the sump. So bit of red coat. The carburetor I haven't done anything with yet. I still need to take this apart, strip and clean it, see what condition it's in. You can get rebuild kits for it. Oh yeah, you can. That red coat is dissolving slowly. That, because it dissolves, I can chuck that back in the container. I'll get the foil off and that'll re-dissolve into the mixture. But, the carb, it's a 363 is the part number, and you can get rebuild kits for it, but like anything from the Amel Berlin people, they're really expensive. I think it was £70, £90, something like that, plus £30 shipping, which is a lot. So I'll take it apart carefully and see what I can reuse there. But yeah, second red coat time, I think. The other thing I'd forgotten because it was outside drying is the radiator. I've no idea what happened to this because it was so gummed up, not inside but on the outside, like oil and grease and muck all through the fins. It's taken me a long time to sort of try and clean it out. There's still a lot of it there, sort of in the corners, so this still needs more cleaning. I also had to just resolder this piece just at the bottom. It had come loose and broken, so I've just done that now, just a quick couple of dabs of solder either end. And what I'll do with this is I will go through and I'll straighten all of these fins. The inside of this isn't too bad, but I will give it another soak through with that CLR type stuff, which should clean up the inside of it nicely. You can see there's a bit of surface rust in there, but if you look through the bottom, it's a bit hard to see without a light. The passages inside all look fine. Yeah, I'm not sure what this was coated with. It's almost as if the paint that was on it had gone sticky or something. So like I say, I'm going to straighten all of this up, probably try and degrease it a few more times, because you can see there's still quite a bit there between the fins, but you can straighten all of these out. And then this will also get just a satin black paint, which because I don't like it, all this brass and copper and stuff. If you take things like this to get them reconditioned, that's what they'd do. They'd repaint it, because that's what they were just black. So I think it'll come up okay. And there is a date on it, so 1M57, so I'm guessing that means January 1957 this was made. Yeah, a bit more cleaning required on this. I've cleaned this at least 3 or 4 times now, and it's still filthy, so a bit more cleaning there. Gone through all of the fins on the radiator with a pair of needle nose pliers, just trying to get them straight and get all the bent corners fixed up. But this is just the muck that came off doing that. You can see it's almost like tar or something. and that's all through this. So I'm hoping now that I've straightened those fins, I can get a bit more degreaser in there and hopefully get this a bit cleaner. Yeah, it's really coated in it. I don't know what it would have been. Having a look inside the tank, and it hasn't worked. So I'm thinking the inside of the tank still isn't clean enough. You can see where it's worked at the top, but that's because I was able to wire brush that bit. So I think what I'm going to need to do is I'll put in some phosphoric acid solution and shake it all with some nuts and bolts or something like that, and sort of rattle that around to try and get all the rust and stuff off. But, I've still got plenty of the red coat that's in here, so I can give it another go. But I think I'll do that now. The radiator's getting cleaner. I found after using the needle nose pliers to get rid of the worst of the bends, the Nipex work really well because they're narrow enough to get in there and the jaws are parallel, so you can sort of work along, and it just takes all the little kinks out of things quite nicely. And it's sort of, because you're running it down between two fins, it kind of helps smooth out the ones either side of it as well. Just like that. So this is coming up pretty well now. See little places where it's not quite flat. So yeah, I recommend these for doing this job. Once you've got in there and got the worst of it, because some of these were completely flattened, and this is just kind of trying to smooth it off at the end. It's interesting to note that these aren't necessarily straight the way they're soldered. They're sometimes a little bit wavy, just the way they're all soldered together, I guess, but that's okay. The other good thing is you can sort of do this with one hand. And then of course, once you've done all of this, you need to handle it very carefully so you don't just end up bending them all again. But this, it's still grubby, but you can see through it now, whereas before you couldn't even really see through it. It was so filthy, and I still don't understand how. I'm trying to think if there's any way. I guess if you've got a really big oil leak on the front of the engine, it could all have sort of sprayed up into there and then collected grime. Not really sure. But I could spend hours doing that. Definitely getting there. And I put in handfuls of nuts, basically. Those there, into the fuel tank, shook it around, and that got rid of some of the rust, gave it a good clean, and it's actually now got phosphoric acid in there, which will take care of any more surface rust. And then I'll probably give it a good, I'll flush it out with water tomorrow. I'll degrease it because maybe it's sort of oily or greasy inside there, and then it says it has to be really dry before you put the the red coat on. I might not have left it long enough. I think what I'll do is, I usually have my little dehumidifier running here, and I'm going to set the tank up on top of here. This is the outlet, and this is blowing warm air. So I'll set it up on top of that tomorrow night probably, and let it blow that warm air through it all night, and then it should be really nice and dry, so that on Saturday I can retry the red coat. It did clean up the nuts and bolts quite nicely as well, or the nuts. And then what I did is poured boiling water over these, because I find that the boiling water washes everything off, and it makes them hot, so the water that's left on them evaporates quickly. I'll give that a quick spray of WD-40 just to try and prevent the flash rusting. And I think I bought 8 cans of this yesterday, and I've already used 3, I think, just trying to get the engine parts clean. No, it's definitely looking better. Another thing I'm cleaning up is the muffler. I've got a new one of these actually for the other bike, but I think this one's probably good. So again, just giving it a degrease on the outside, shaking any loose crap out of the inside. It doesn't sound too rattly, it's surprisingly heavy. It's not just an open box, there's something in there, but I'm not quite sure what. So degreased it, and this is now just the phosphoric acid just to get rid of the surface rust on the outside, and then I'll give that just a quick coat of paint again, engine enamel, just to stop it rusting again, at least for a little while. I've also started treating the second saddlebag. This stuff, it says a little goes a long way. You're supposed to rub it in and then wipe off the excess. What I'm finding is these are so dry, there's no excess to rub off. You just put it in and it just soaks it up. So I'll keep going until it feels like it's still staying on the surface. It's almost there on the back, because that was the most protected bit at the top. I think it still needs a bit more. And I'm also thinking about making probably just sheet aluminium inserts to go in there, because I'm not sure these are going to hold their shape very well. But if I fold up a piece of metal or sheet steel that I can just paint just to slide in there, just to keep their shape, I think that might help. But they're looking good. They're much more supple and soft, and they still look old, so that's good.